Hi, thank you for watching Dig Into China. I'm Deng Xiaoping. China divides its generations by decades. The post-70s are defined by childhood's after Mao's death in 1976. The post-80s grew up as China reformed and opened to the world under Deng Xiaoping. It is often now argued that the generations change every 5 years or even every 3. The talk is already of the post-2000, most of whom are still in school. To speak of millennials, whose definition in the West is those born between 1981 and 1996, is to shoehorn 4 Chinese generations into one. The gap is easy to grasp if you ask parents to recall their 20s. They mention jobs allocated by the party through their danwei, a government-controlled work unit. Only with its permission could they marry or divorce. For years, women had to report their periods to the danwei to ensure they were complying with the one-child rule. The danwei provided welfare benefits such as free housing, schooling, and healthcare. Their children's lives, by contrast, are defined by choice, individualism, and more personal freedom. The lives of post-90s share 2 features. One is that they begin after the pro-democracy protests of 1989. The state relentlessly scrubbed from the internet any reference to the bloody suppression of the Tiananmen protests. Terrified parents not wanting to put ideas into children's heads keep silent. Some youths know a terse official version that casts the students as rabble-rousers and says nothing of their deaths. Some observers ask if this enforced amnesia could embolden the young to rise up again. Others argue that because they do not know that the army gunned down students in cold blood and see only a China that has become richer and stronger under the party's rule, they are more likely than older generations to see it as a benevolent force. The second feature is that those born since 1991 spent their late teens with Mr. Xi in power. They might be called Generation Xi. Since primary school, they have received an education with more emphasis on patriotism than at any time since Mao, following an overhaul of the syllabus after Tiananmen. Students take obligatory courses on Marxism, nationalism, and the doctrines of Mao. Last year, Xi Jinping thought was added. This affects how they see the world. A survey in 2019 by China Youth Daily, a state organ, found that 3 in 4 of those born after 1995 think China is not perfect but always improving. China's youth merit attention for the simple reason that they will one day be the people in charge. Over the next decade, they will gain influential positions in China's private sector firms or set up their own. More than half of Chinese in their 20s express a desire to start their own business. Others will climb up the ranks of the ruling Communist Party. How they understand their country's past and what they ask of its future are essential to understand how they might one day lead China. But China's youngsters also deserve scrutiny for what they are now, vitally young. Youth often stands for trend-setting and rebellion. In China, the young must navigate an authoritarian state and a bruisingly competitive education system. This is when big life decisions are made and adult identities formed. China's young faced unusual pressures. They were born under the one-child policy, a harshly enforced system that from 1980 to 2016 let most urban families have only one child. Many rural families were allowed to, and ethnic minorities like Tibetans were in theory exempt. Without siblings, they shoulder along the full weight of their parents' and grandparents' expectations to excel at school, secure a stable job, marry and have children all before the age of 30. For Chinese youth in their 20s and early 30s, many have spent some time living away from home, but are not yet in the thick of parenthood themselves. In China, this cohort has a generational identity, the 90后 or post-90s, a shorthand term for those born between 1990 and 1999. They number 188 million, more than the combined population of Australia, Britain, and Germany. The 90后are already making their mark in ways unimaginable to those born a decade earlier. Many are defying social convention, often to their parents' alarm. The 90后are China's best educated cohort yet. Last year, the country churned out a record 9 million graduates, but increasing competition for good jobs means that returns to education are falling. Lots plump for stable civil service jobs, yet some resent doing tedious work. One 27-year-old live streamer who sells cosmetics asked why he should settle for a government job that is BS and boring. A paycheck is no longer enough. Young people want a sense of purpose. As labor-intensive manufacturing winds down, young migrants from the countryside are taking up gigs that give them more freedom in the booming informal sector. Young Chinese are also making choices about when, whom, and whether they wed. Their elders, who would once have made matches for them, have never been less involved. Newlyweds hit a 10-year low in 2019. Women in Shanghai, the largest city in China, marry on average at 29, later than Americans and a jump of 6 years in a decade. Even in rural areas, the age is 25 and rising. Young Chinese are adept at avoiding traditional norms. Many gays and lesbians who once felt compelled to marry straight folk unite in civil union thanks to matchmaking apps. This pleases conservative parents while letting gay people choose their own partners. China does not allow gay marriage, and homosexuality remains taboo. The identities of the young are also shaped by the digital age. On social media, they start trends, vent frustrations, and circulate knowing memes. Despite pervasive censorship, they use China's online networks to promote such causes as feminism, environmentalism, and nationalism. When they feel insulted by foreign entities, be they K-pop bands or American National Basketball Association, millions clamor online for consumer boycotts that cow even mighty multinationals. Patriotic sentiment has long been strong, but increasingly youth do not question the regime's claim that loving country and party are one and the same, a victory of China's propaganda machine. In June 1989, tanks and guns cleared student protesters from Tiananmen Square with murderous force. To many Westerners and older Chinese liberals, the young lacked the qualities that made the Tiananmen generation remarkable: ideals, rebellion, even guts. The 90后, aka the post-90s, are seen as apolitical, except in their naive and brash patriotism, concerned with getting ahead, but only to buy the latest iPhone. Many see them as materialistic and entitled, a generation of little emperors doted on by their parents. However, this does not always describe the 90后. When police arrested a human rights lawyer called Pu Zhiqiang in 2014 for joining a private memorial to the victims of Tiananmen, students uploaded photos of themselves to Weibo, a microblob, holding signs in his support. "We are the 90后," the message read. "We are certainly not brain dead. In fact, we are passionate, we are rising, and we are ready to take on responsibility." Are Chinese youth living up to these words? Yes, there has been no direct youth-led challenge to the regime, but the young people speak out for social causes. Many join volunteer groups or donate to charity. No generation has been more vocal in its support for LGBT and women's rights. Students have backed factory workers trying to unionize and staged silent street protests about climate changes. This takes guts. Under Xi Jinping, China's president since 2013, intimidation and arrests of activists have become common. Young people do not intend to challenge the legitimacy of the ruling Communist Party. Their social liberalism has grown even as support for the party rises. The 90后 are comfortable with a rising, assertive China. The party knows how to play on this. It has hammered home that China stopped the spread of COVID-19 within its borders as the West bungles its response. Spin doctors have not had to exert themselves on the defeat of Donald Trump's presidency in 2020 election. More overseas Chinese students are returning home disillusioned with the West. Young pride feeds off a new worldly confidence. Yet, not every young Chinese holds rosy views of the party. In Hong Kong, young protesters fighting for Western freedoms have made it clear their fury at their erosion by the Beijing government. Tibetan and Uyghur youths seethe in silence as brutal state-led campaigns erase their cultures and languages. In Xinjiang, more than 1 million Uyghurs have been locked up without trial. Students are told their good behavior decides if relatives get out. Ethnic Mongols in the northern province of Inner Mongolia staged rare protests last year over an order requiring more use of Mandarin in schools. Hundreds were arrested. Guerrilla, a young ethnic Mongol, says she feels deeply unhappy with the government but also terribly afraid. Who wouldn't? Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly.